Money is a strange entity in human life. At first glance, it appears as the very essence of power. People equate wealth with strength, believing that the one who possesses riches automatically commands respect, influence, and control. But this belief is an illusion. Money in itself is hollow, fragile, and fleeting. It is nothing more than a symbol, a reflection of something deeper. Like a shadow on the wall, money moves in relation to the light source of true power, but it is never the light itself. Those who chase only the shadow end up trapped, confused, and enslaved by the very thing they thought would liberate them. To understand this, imagine a man who inherits a fortune without wisdom or authority. He can buy pleasure, comfort, and even the appearance of status, yet at his core he remains powerless. People orbit him not because of who he is, but because of what he temporarily holds. His money becomes the stage upon which others act, using him as a resource rather than respecting him as a force. The moment his wealth diminishes, so too does his influence. What he mistook for power evaporates into thin air, revealing the emptiness beneath. Money alone does not shape destiny. It can buy moments, but it cannot anchor respect. It can purchase service, but not loyalty. It can attract attention, but not reverence. The truth is that money is only as strong as the hand that wields it. Without an inner center of gravity, money becomes chaotic energy. It pushes its possessor into restless consumption, into endless cycles of comparison, into fear of losing what has been gained. This is why so many wealthy men live in quiet anxiety. They are prisoners of their possessions, unable to breathe freely without worrying about loss, taxation, theft, betrayal. Their lives are padded with luxury yet weighed down with invisible chains. The shadow they pursued has wrapped around them, suffocating their spirit. But when money is approached differently, its nature transforms. Instead of being worshipped as an idol, it becomes disciplined like a wild horse broken by a firm hand. It becomes a servant of a higher vision rather than a master dictating hollow pursuits. This requires something more than financial knowledge. It requires psychological integration. The man must recognize that money is not a final destination, but a medium through which his deeper will expresses itself. When aligned with purpose, wealth takes on the form of a tool of transformation. It becomes directed energy, able to construct, dismantle, and reshape the external world according to the inner world of the one who holds it. This is why some men with modest resources exert more influence than others with vast fortunes. The difference lies not in quantity, but in quality of relationship. The shallow man sees money as treasure, something to hoard and display. The deeper man sees it as clay, something to mold, reshape, and give form according to his intent. One is enslaved by the fear of losing, the other is empowered by the act of creating. The shallow man becomes a victim of chance and fortune, while the deeper man becomes a participant in destiny. The transformation of money into power begins with the rejection of illusion. It requires seeing wealth not as the foundation of identity, but as the echo of inner strength. When a man roots his being in something higher than gold, when he develops authority, vision, and discipline, then money becomes an extension of his essence rather than the substitute for it. He no longer fears losing it, because he knows that wealth can be rebuilt as long as the foundation of his character remains intact. In this sense, money becomes fluid, always in motion, always serving, never dominating. It becomes the shadow of his authority rather than the fragile mask covering his weakness. The greatest danger lies in confusing the shadow for the source. Men who worship wealth as if it were divine end up drained of vitality. They forget that the shadow moves only because something greater stands behind it. They build lives around accumulation, surrounding themselves with symbols of success, yet inwardly they remain hollow. They never step into the reality of power because they mistake the surface reflection for the deeper fire. This confusion leads to cycles of dissatisfaction. No amount of wealth is enough because it is being used to fill a void it can never reach. To truly master money, one must descend into the darker truths of the human psyche, where desire, fear, and ambition clash. There one sees clearly that money amplifies what already exists within. If a man is weak, wealth magnifies his weakness, exposing it to the world. If a man is strong, wealth magnifies his strength, extending it into realms he could not reach otherwise. The difference lies in the inner structure. This is why money has destroyed some and elevated others. It is not money that decides, but the man behind it. When understood as a shadow of power, money loses its mystique. It is no longer a god to worship, but a resource to command. It becomes part of a larger alchemy, the process of turning raw material into meaningful form. It bends to the will of the one who has achieved mastery over himself, who no longer projects his insecurities onto gold and silver. In the hands of such a man, money ceases to enslave and begins to serve. It ceases to control and begins to obey. It becomes not the goal of his life, the extension of his authority into the material world. Power has never belonged to those who simply accumulate wealth. To those who understand how to transform wealth into something that transcends numbers and possessions. The man who hoards gold is little different from a miser guarding his treasure chest, surrounded by glitter, yet untouched by real strength. Influence does not grow from piles of coins. It grows from the way those coins are used, exchanged, and converted into symbols that shape human perception. Money is not powerful in isolation. It becomes powerful when it creates meaning in the minds of others. History shows us this truth again and again. The great rulers of the past did not merely hold wealth. They used it to construct monuments, to reward loyalty, to fund armies, to commission art, and to cultivate myth. Each coin spent was not just a transaction but a message. A castle built with gold is not only stone and mortar, it is a declaration of permanence. A feast hosted with abundance is not only food, but a display of generosity and strength. The wise man sees money as raw material to sculpt the reality others will live within. Through its exchange, wealth becomes something larger than itself. It becomes a symbol, and symbols command obedience more deeply than numbers ever could. A man who spends on empty luxuries may gain admiration for a moment, but admiration fades when it has no roots in something enduring. Expensive clothing, grand cars, glittering trinkets, these things are signals of wealth, but not of authority. They are temporary flashes that draw attention, but do not anchor respect. True power lies in directing money toward things that alter the story others tell about you. It lies in creating bonds of loyalty, obligations, or reverence that endure long after the transaction is complete. A man who finances opportunity for others binds them to him not through force, but through gratitude and dependence. A man who invests in institutions builds a structure that will echo his name even when he is absent. This is the symbolic exchange, the alchemy that transforms gold into something weightless yet unbreakable: influence. Influence is not about ownership but about shaping perception. A wealthy merchant who only clings to his riches is limited. His reach extends only as far as his gold can buy at that moment. The one who uses his resources to construct a reputation, to weave a narrative of strength, cunning, or benevolence, creates an empire of the mind. And empires of the mind are far harder to overthrow than empires of stone. Even silence can be purchased wisely. To pay for discretion, to fund secrecy, to ensure that certain voices remain unheard. This too is an exchange where money becomes more than itself. Wealth spent strategically is like water flowing into the cracks of human ambition, filling spaces where loyalty or fear or admiration can take root. This is the Machiavellian art, not to squander resources on shallow pleasures, but to place them where they shift the balance of power. Consider the subtle difference between spending and investing. Spending dissipates energy into fleeting satisfactions. Investing, in this sense, is not only about financial return but about psychological leverage. A banquet that unites allies is an investment. A gift that secures future loyalty is an investment. A discreet payment that silences a potential threat is an investment. These are not random expenses. They are deliberate moves on the chessboard of life. The man who understands this never wastes his gold, because each coin becomes a tool of persuasion, a seed planted in the soil of influence. True genius lies in recognizing that perception is often more powerful than possession. You may own vast wealth, but if no one perceives you as strong, decisive, or commanding, your wealth remains inert. On the other hand, even a modest display, if invested with symbolic meaning, can create the impression of greatness. A modestly funded cause, a carefully chosen act of generosity, or a strategic alliance can generate waves of influence far beyond the initial expense. Money, directed with vision, multiplies itself not by interest, but by the narratives it creates in the minds of others. This is why some men lose everything when their fortune collapses, while others rise again from nothing. Those who relied solely on money's material weight find themselves stripped bare when it is gone. But those who use their wealth to craft networks of obligation, to build intangible structures of influence, remain powerful even when gold no longer fills their hands. For their true currency is not money but meaning. They do not merely possess resources, they embody authority that others instinctively recognize and obey. In this transformation, money ceases to be a static object and becomes a fluid current. It flows through relationships, shaping loyalties, constructing myths, creating psychological realities that bind others without chains. It is not how much is spent that matters, but how it is directed, how it is framed, and what story it tells. A single gesture can carry more weight than years of hoarding, if that gesture resonates with the symbolic depths of human perception. Money in its raw form is fragile. It can be lost to theft, to corruption, to the collapse of markets. But once converted into influence, it takes on a different quality. Influence cannot be stolen. It can only be eroded slowly if neglected. Influence is remembered in stories and loyalties, in silent obligations that outlast the glitter of gold. The man who understands this no longer treats money as treasure to be guarded, but as fire to be directed. If fire is left untended, it burns out or consumes blindly. But in the hands of a master, it forges steel, warms kingdoms, and illuminates paths that others are too blind to see. A man may sit upon mountains of wealth and yet remain hollow, fragile, and unseen. Gold may fill his hands, but emptiness gnaws at his core. He spends extravagantly, he decorates himself with luxury, and he parades his fortune before the world. Yet behind every purchase lies the same haunting silence. The world may look at him with envy. Gaze of envy is shallow. It does not linger once the spectacle fades. What is revealed in such men is a profound truth. Wealth without authority is nothing more than ornament, fragile as glass, unable to withstand the weight of real life. Authority is not the same as possession. Possession belongs to the external world. It is measured in accounts, estates, and objects. Authority belongs to the inner world. It is the invisible structure of will, discipline, and vision that gives direction to life. Without authority, wealth becomes a mask that slips easily. The man who lacks command over himself and over others cannot hold respect for long, no matter how dazzling his riches may be. He buys admiration for a moment. It fades as quickly as it came, because admiration rooted in envy is not loyalty and cannot survive absence. The emptiness of wealth without authority becomes clear when crisis strikes. A man of fortune may gather a crowd during feasts and celebrations, but when the storm comes, only those bound by genuine respect and obligation remain. The others scatter like birds fleeing at the first sign of danger. His wealth may still exist, its protective aura has vanished, because wealth alone cannot command courage or sacrifice from others. True authority, however, compels men to remain loyal even when the treasure chest is empty. Authority is born from mastery. First mastery over oneself, then mastery in directing the currents of others. Inner authority, a wealthy man becomes a slave to his own appetites. He spends to fill an inner void, using luxuries to cover his insecurity. Each purchase is a silent confession that he does not yet believe in his own strength. He believes money will make him significant, but significance cannot be bought. It radiates from within. When wealth becomes the substitute for authority, life turns into a theater of consumption. He is not respected as a man, he is tolerated as a provider of temporary pleasures. When the provision ends, so does the illusion of respect. This is why true rulers throughout history understood that wealth was not the foundation of their power, but only its reflection. They cultivated authority first, the ability to inspire obedience, the presence that silences a room, the decisiveness that bends events to their will. Wealth followed as a natural consequence, drawn to the gravitational pull of their vision and command. A man with authority can rebuild wealth if he loses it, because his essence itself attracts resources and opportunity. But a man with only wealth and no authority loses everything when fortune turns against him, for he has no structure within to call new riches back into his hands. Authority is invisible, yet its effects are undeniable. It shows itself in the way people respond to a man without needing to be asked. It is present in the weight of his words, in the steadiness of his silence, in the discipline he maintains when others surrender to indulgence. Authority is not noise, it is gravity. People orbit around it naturally, recognizing its pull without having to be forced. Wealth may dazzle the eyes, but authority anchors the soul. When the two are combined, money becomes a force of transformation. Without authority, money is only decoration, a fragile shell covering inner weakness. The tragedy is that many men attempt to use money as a substitute for authority. They think that if they can display enough wealth, the world will mistake it for strength. But the world can sense the difference. Money buys attention, but authority demands respect. Attention fades quickly, consumed by the next spectacle, while respect endures because it springs from recognition of something deeper. A wealthy man without authority is like a king wearing a crown too heavy for his head. The crown impresses the crowd for a while, but eventually the burden exposes his fragility. To turn wealth into power, a man must first cultivate the authority that commands it. He must embody discipline that prevents money from ruling him. He must develop vision that directs wealth towards something greater than consumption. He must embody steadiness so that others can trust in his judgment rather than in his possessions. Wealth in this sense becomes the servant of authority, extending its reach into the material world. Without this inner command, wealth decays into vanity, attracting parasites who seek to feed on it rather than followers who seek to build with it. The emptiness of wealth without authority lies in its inability to give meaning. Money can provide comfort, but comfort alone does not satisfy the hunger of the soul. A man needs to feel that his life bends reality, that his choices carry weight, that others look to him not merely for resources but for direction. Authority answers this need. It gives weight to existence, turning wealth from a distraction into a channel of influence. Without authority, money is like water held in open hands, always slipping away, never forming a river. With authority, even a small stream can carve through stone, shaping landscapes, and leaving a mark that endures across generations. The highest art in life is not merely to possess resources, but to transform them into weapons that alter the balance of power. Money in its raw state is neutral, silent. It waits for the hand that directs it, shaping it into something that either strengthens or weakens its owner. For most men, money is little more than comfort. It cushions their insecurities, decorates their lives, and feeds their hunger for validation. But for the one who sees through the illusion, money becomes more than a possession. It becomes a lever, a shield, a sword, and at times even a mask. This is the Machiavellian transformation, the conversion of a resource into a weapon that shapes reality itself. To understand this transformation, one must first abandon the childish notion that money's highest purpose is pleasure. Pleasure fades, indulgence weakens, and comfort dulls the spirit. The man who uses wealth for nothing beyond his appetites slowly becomes defenseless, for he trades away sharpness for softness. His gold serves him only for a moment until it betrays him, leaving him dependent, complacent, and exposed. But the man who learns to see money as an instrument of strategy never allows it to enslave him. He knows that wealth is not to be consumed mindlessly, but to be deployed with precision, like an arrow that strikes only when the target is in sight. Money as a weapon is not about excess or display. It is about timing. A well-placed investment in the right moment of weakness can break a rival more effectively than any open confrontation. A subtle withdrawal of resources can destabilize an enemy faster than a direct attack. Even generosity, when calculated, can be weaponized. To fund someone's ambition, knowing it binds them to your hand, is to wield money not as charity but as control. To offer aid in the exact moment it will never be forgotten is to engrave your presence upon another's destiny. In this sense, every coin becomes an arrow, every investment a blade, every payment a calculated move on the chessboard. The genius of this approach lies in concealment. To wield money as a weapon is not to flaunt it, but to disguise it. The most effective weapons are the ones no one sees until they have already struck. The wise man does not need to broadcast his wealth, because to broadcast is to invite envy and resistance. Instead, he cloaks his resources, deploying them invisibly, letting outcomes speak for him while the world assumes fate or chance has favored his path. This is the Machiavellian trick, the ability to manipulate reality through money while appearing untouched by its influence. History provides endless examples. Great rulers and cunning strategists rarely kept their wealth idle. They moved it as if it were a military force, each expenditure designed to weaken adversaries, secure allies, or build symbols that outlived their mortal presence. Money funded wars, yes, but it also bought silence, erased enemies through bribery, elevated followers through patronage, and shaped myths through monuments. In every act, wealth became more than a resource. It became a means of rewriting the order of the world. Those who treated gold as treasure remained vulnerable, while those who treated it as a weapon shaped history itself. The man who learns this art recognizes that it is not the size of his fortune that matters, but the precision with which he deploys it. Even modest resources, if guided with cunning, can deliver outsized power. A well-placed gift can generate more loyalty than a mountain of riches spent carelessly. A small but decisive payment can open doors that brute wealth could never unlock. The transformation is not in the amount, but in the intent. When guided by vision and timing, money ceases to be static and becomes dynamic, flowing into cracks where it can fracture obstacles and dissolve resistance. At its highest level, money as a weapon is not even noticed as money. It manifests as influence, as inevitability. Others do not see the gold itself, they see only the weight of decisions bending in favor of the one who wields it. They sense power, not purchase. They feel the pressure of authority, not the glitter of coins. This subtlety is what makes it enduring. The man who openly flaunts his wealth makes himself a target, but the man who veils his wealth in power makes himself untouchable. To wield money as weapon also requires restraint. A sword swung wildly harms its wielder as much as his enemy. Likewise, careless use of money dissipates its strength. To turn resources into power, one must cultivate patience, the discipline to wait to hold, to strike only when the advantage is certain. This discipline separates the strategist from the spender. It ensures that every coin serves a purpose greater than itself. When mastered, money ceases to be an external possession and becomes an extension of will. It is not spent for survival, not wasted on vanity, not hoarded out of fear. It is directed energy, sharpened into a weapon of influence, control, and transformation. The man who achieves this mastery no longer thinks in terms of wealth, but in terms of power. For him, money is never the end. It is always the means, always the servant, always the silent force by which he bends the game of life in his favor. Do you want me to now combine all 4 expanded keynotes with the intro slow hook to one complete flowing script, without separations, or should I keep them as distinct expanded parts for now? Here's a fitting conclusion for the entire script, written in the same deep and timeless voice that mirrors the tone of the expanded keynotes. Power does not lie in money itself, but in the transformation of money into something greater: authority, influence, and the ability to bend reality to one's will. Wealth in the hands of the unshaped man becomes emptiness, a fragile ornament that vanishes at the first gust of misfortune. But in the hands of one who has cultivated discipline, vision, and presence, wealth becomes a force of strategy, a weapon wielded with precision, and a symbol that reshapes how others perceive him. The true art is not to chase riches as an end, but to command them as a servant, directing them toward the construction of loyalty, respect, and inevitability. This is the Machiavellian mastery: to never confuse the shadow for the source, to never worship gold for its own sake, but to see it as clay, as fire, as raw energy molded into enduring power.